Today, we're going to completely demystify CMA segment reporting. As someone who's been teaching this for a long time, I know exactly what it takes to get you over that finish line, and we are going to make these complex concepts so crystal clear that you'll walk into that exam room feeling absolutely unstoppable.
So here is our game plan. We'll start with a traditional gap trap, then build a segmented statement step by step. After that, we'll tackle volume versus existence, avoid the controllability gotcha, weigh short-term versus long-term decisions, and wrap up with a final exam checklist. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The traditional gap trap, or why standard statements fail managers.
Okay, we really need to talk about why standard financial statements are practically useless for evaluating an internal manager. Think about your standard GAAP income statement. It's organized by function, right? Things like cost of goods sold versus administrative expenses. But here is the massive trap. It lumps variable costs and fixed costs all together. If you're a manager trying to figure out how your day-to-day decisions actually impact the bottom line, that mixed bag of costs tells you absolutely nothing. Compare that to the CMA contribution margin approach. This is the gold standard. It's organized by behavior, meaning it literally draws a line in the sand separating the costs a manager can actually control from the fixed overhead decided by corporate.
Moving on to Section 2. Building the segmented statement step by step.
Let's build out this core framework. And I gotta tell you, as your mentor, you absolutely must memorize these levels for the exam. Let's use a Mid-Atlantic clothing chain as our example. You always start right at the top with sales. First, subtract your variable costs, so your cost of goods sold and variable selling expenses. What's left over? That equals your contribution margin. Then, from that contribution margin, you subtract your traceable fixed costs. Traceable just means direct. Think of the rent for that specific clothing store location. If we shut the store down, that rent bill completely disappears. Once you subtract those traceable costs, boom, you arrive at the segment margin. It's really just a progressive peeling back of the layers to find true profitability.
Section 3. Volume versus existence. Let's clear the fog.
I know from years of teaching this stuff that students constantly get contribution margin and segment margin mixed up. So let's lock this down. First up, contribution margin. This metric is 100% about volume, period. If you sell just one more shirt in that store, your contribution margin goes up. It's telling you exactly how much every single dollar of sales is contributing toward covering your fixed costs. It is a highly dynamic, volume-driven number.
On the flip side, we have the segment margin. If contribution margin is volume, segment margin is existence. This is the golden rule. It is the absolute best measure of the long-term profitability of a segment. It asks the harsh question, is this department even bringing in enough money to cover its own direct rent? If this number is consistently negative, its very existence is on the chopping block. So think of this comparison as your ultimate mental cheat sheet for test day. Contribution margin drives your short-term decisions. Stuff like, hey, should we accept this special one-time bulk order? Segment margin, however, drives the huge long-term decisions, like whether an entire department needs to be permanently shut down. Keep that split crystal clear in your mind when you're tackling those tricky multiple-choice scenarios.
Now hold on a second. There is one more layer to the overall company statement. After you calculate the segment margin for all your different divisions, you have to subtract common fixed costs. We're talking about the CEO's salary or maybe the upkeep for corporate headquarters. But listen to me, here's a rule you must burn into your brain. Never ever allocate these common costs to segments when evaluating a manager's performance. Think about it. Why should a local store manager be penalized for corporate overhead they didn't approve and literally cannot control? They shouldn't.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the controllability gotcha. Time to beat those exam traps.
The exam writers absolutely love setting traps around controllability, but you're going to see right through them. Imagine a store manager. They control their staff's hourly wages, that's variable, and they control their local ad budget, which is a traceable fixed cost. But they do not control HQ's electricity bill. So the exam asks, how should we evaluate this store manager? What do? Well, you evaluate them using the controllable segment margin. You only judge them on the line items they actually have the power to change. Fair is fair, right?
But actually, what if they change the question? What if they ask, should we close this entire division? Suddenly the game changes. We aren't evaluating the manager anymore. We're evaluating the business segment itself. For division closures, we have to use the segment margin, which includes all traceable costs to that division, regardless of whether the local manager controls them or not. Because if you shut down the division, all those traceable costs just disappear.
All right, Section 5, short-term versus long-term. Let's make the right call.
Let's put some actual numbers to this to see how it plays out in the real world. Imagine a segment has a positive contribution margin of $10,000. Sounds pretty good at first glance, right? They're making 10 grand over their variable costs. But they have traceable fixed costs, maybe equipment leases and building rent that total $15,000. So what's the real story here?
The real story is negative $5,000. Yikes. That is your segment margin. So how do we interpret this? Well, in the short term, that positive $10,000 contribution margin means they're at least contributing something toward the fixed cost the company is stuck paying anyway. You might actually keep them open for another month just to harvest that cash. But long term, the harsh reality is a $5,000 loss. They can't even cover their own direct costs. This right here is exactly how understanding these margins prevents disastrous long-term decisions.
We've covered some serious ground today, and you're doing great. Let's hit Section 6, your final exam checklist. Before we wrap up, make sure you are fully armed with these 3 essentials. 1. Know how to calculate the contribution margin ratio. It's just sales minus variable costs divided by sales. 2. Always distinguish between traceable and common costs. Use the disappearance test. Traceable costs disappear if the segment dies. Common costs stay no matter what. And 3. Absolutely ignore common costs when you evaluate managers. If you get this segmented framework locked into your brain, you are going to absolutely breeze through the performance management questions.
Keep pushing hard on your studies, guys, because you are getting so incredibly close to earning those 3 letters, CMA. I want to leave you with this to chew on before your next study session. As you review this, ask yourself, are you finding the math behind the contribution margin ratio trickier, or is it the logic of that sneaky controllability concept that's giving you a harder time? Figure out your weak spot, attack it using the framework we built today, and you'll be unstoppable. Thanks for hanging out with me in this explainer, and happy studying.